Odile, the seeker of truth.
The Lord built his church on his apostles, with Peter as their head. But all the apostles fell at the hands of those who rejected the gospel. Yet the seed had been planted and had begun to grow. Peter died in Rome at the hands of Emperor Nero. Since Jesus appointed him the rock on which the church will be built, and it was in Rome that he had been martyred and buried, his successors would remain in Rome to carry on the torch Peter had carried, leading the faithful from there. The apostles went out into the world to make disciples and establish churches as they spread the gospel. They were martyred. Peter, before he died, had some named followers, such as Mark, who was his disciple and served as his interpreter and scribe. Peter had other disciples who would go on to succeed him as the bishop of Rome, such as Linus, Anacletus, and Clement, who became the second, third, and fourth popes respectively. The enemy would expect that eliminating the apostles would lead to the church's early demise, but apostolic succession and the Lord's promise to his church that the gates of hell shall never prevail against it are what he must have overlooked. John had disciples such as Polycarp, who became the bishop of Smyrna, Papias, who became the bishop of Hierapolis, and Ignatius, who became the bishop of Antioch. Paul had disciples and companions, including Timothy, Titus, Silas, Luke, Barnabas, John Mark, Tychicus, Aristarchus, Trophimus, Demas, Epaphras, Sopater, Secundus, Gaius, and others. They ordained bishops and priests through whom the tradition would be passed down, maintaining the church's continuity. Christian meetings for the Eucharist and worship evolved in response to the sporadic rather than constant intensity of persecution across the empire. Generally, Christians avoided open public assemblies due to their refusal to participate in Roman pagan rituals or emperor worship, which marked them as subversive. Instead, they relied on house churches, private homes, and adapted for communal gatherings, where the Eucharist was central, involving the breaking of bread, sharing of wine, prayer, singing hymns, and reading scripture. During periods of heightened persecution, meetings became more clandestine, sometimes relocating to rural areas, basements, or later catacombs, primarily for burials, but occasionally for refuge. In periods of relative tolerance, gatherings were still discreet, but less fraught with immediate danger. Persecution was often driven by local governors rather than by direct imperial edicts until later reigns, such as those of Decius and Valerian. During Nero's reign, early Christians in Rome initially met in small private gatherings, in homes, as Christianity was a nascent movement, often viewed as a sect of Judaism, and enjoyed some legal protections under Roman law. But after he falsely accused Christians of the Great Fire and persecuted them, Christians did not meet openly, but instead hid their gatherings to avoid detection and arrest. They celebrated the Eucharist as part of secretive house church meetings, often held at night or in discreet locations to evade Roman authorities. The fear of denunciation made public or large-scale worship impossible. During the reigns of Galba, Otho, and Vitellius, from 68 to 69 AD, persecution was minimal. However, Christians met in secret house churches, where the Eucharist was celebrated in private homes to maintain a low profile amid the general instability. During the reigns of Vespasian and Titus from 69 to 81 AD, there were no major persecutions, though suspicion lingered after Nero. Christians met secretly in house churches, holding discreet gatherings to avoid drawing the attention of Roman officials. Between 81 and 117 AD, during the reigns of Domitian, Nerva, and Trajan, Christians met in secret house churches. The Eucharist was part of clandestine meetings held before dawn, and participants dispersed quickly to avoid arrest. Domitian exiled Pope Clement I to the mines of Chersonesus, where he performed a miracle that led to the conversion of many prisoners and their baptism. As a result, Domitian ordered that an anchor be placed around his neck and that he be cast into the sea. Under Trajan, Popes Evaristus, Alexander I, and Sixtus I led a haunted church, ordaining bishops in secret. They continued to meet secretly in house churches during Hadrian's reign from 117 AD to 138 AD, with some blending into Jewish communities for cover. During his reign, Pope Sixtus I was martyred in 125 AD, and Pope Telesphorus, known as the Great Martyr, was killed around 138 AD. When Antoninus Pius was emperor between 138 and 161 AD, persecutions against Christians were sporadic and localized, driven primarily by widespread hostility or by local authorities rather than a systematic policy initiated by the emperor himself. Pope Hyginus was martyred around 140 AD during his reign. Antoninus continued the policies of his predecessors, Trajan and Hadrian, which generally prohibited extrajudicial mob actions against Christians and emphasized that they should not be punished without due process or evidence of wrongdoing. He also had letters that forbade tumultuous outbreaks against Christians and even punished false accusers. His administration allowed Christianity to strengthen internally through synods and doctrinal development and meet these challenges, though Christians continued to meet secretly. When Marcus Aurelius became emperor from 161 to 180 AD, Christians suffered hostility and violence. Though he didn't issue any anti-Christian edicts, the persecutions at Lyon happened during his reign. As a result of refusing to worship the Roman gods, Christians were accused of magic, paedicide, incest, and treason. Popes Pius I, Anastatus, Soter, and Eleutherius led the church through harsh persecutions and the martyrdom of believers in Lyon. Modern historians believe Marcus may have tried to curb Christian persecution and did not actively persecute Christians. Justin Martyr describes Sunday assemblies during the reigns of Antoninus Pius and Marcus Aurelius, held in a single location, urban or rural, for scripture readings, exhortations, prayers, and the Eucharist, bread and wine mixed with water representing Christ's body and blood, distributed by deacons. These were communal and not inherently secret, but held amid growing suspicion and local persecutions. Under Septimius Severus, between 193 and 211, a great edict for the persecution of Christians wasn't issued, but he banned conversions to Judaism and Christianity through his 202 AD edict. He prohibited the Jewish practice of circumcision and baptism, which is how anyone became Christian. During his reign from 249 to 251, Decius conducted loyalty tests across the empire. Those who refused to burn incense to the gods faced the death penalty. The reign of Severus and Decius forced many Christians into hiding. This marked the first widespread underground phase, during which catacombs were used as refuges in Rome. Entrances were blocked by imperial decree, but Christians accessed them via hidden paths. Many fled the cities. Pope Fabian was seized and killed in the arena. His death recorded by pagans as an act of royal dignity. He was the first pope to die in a systematic empire-wide persecution. Under Valerian in 257 AD, persecutions were empire-wide. He targeted the clergy, executed bishops like Cyprian, and banned cemetery meetings. Christians went into extreme hiding in basements and catacombs. Pope Sixtus II, along with 6 other deacons, was arrested and executed by beheading on August 6, 258 AD, while they were gathered in the catacomb of Callistus for a liturgical service. 4 days later, on August 10, 258 AD, Lawrence, the 7th deacon under Sixtus, was sentenced to a slow and painful death by roasting alive on a gridiron. He endured the torture with remarkable composure, even reportedly joking to his executioners midway through. "Turn me over, I'm done on this side." Under Diocletian, who reigned from 284 to 305 AD, A period of relative tolerance towards Christians began, continuing the peace that followed earlier persecutions. Between 284 and 302 AD, Christianity experienced significant growth, with Christians able to construct church buildings in some areas and hold gatherings more openly than in previous eras of intense scrutiny. The Eucharist was celebrated in house churches or in these emerging dedicated spaces, though with caution to avoid provoking Roman authorities, as emperor worship and pagan sacrifices remained mandatory in public life. However, influenced by his co-emperor Galerius and concerns over imperial unity, Diocletian initiated the Great Persecution in 303 AD, the most systematic and empire-wide assault on Christianity in Roman history. This phase, from 303 to 305 AD, continuing under his successors until 313 AD, aimed to eradicate the faith through a series of edicts. They were as follows: destruction of churches and burning of scriptures, prohibition of Christian assemblies and worship, arrest and imprisonment of clergy, mandatory sacrifices to Roman gods for all citizens, with refusal leading to torture, enslavement, or execution. As a result, open meetings became impossible. Christians were forced into extreme secrecy, celebrating the Eucharist in hidden locations such as private homes, rural hideouts, or underground catacombs, primarily in Rome and North Africa, used for both burials and covert gatherings. These clandestine meetings were held at great risk, often at night or in small groups to evade detection. The Eucharist, as a communal ritual, was preserved through these underground practices, but many were discovered and martyred. A poignant example is the Martyrs of Albitine, a group of 49 Christians in North Africa arrested in 304 AD while secretly celebrating the Sunday Eucharist in a private house, defying the edicts. When interrogated, they famously declared, "Sine Dominico non possumus," which means, without Sunday, the Lord's Day, and Eucharist, we cannot live, underscoring the ritual's sensuality. They were tortured and executed, highlighting the dangers of even hidden worship. 4 popes ruled in this storm: Marcellinus, Marcellus, Eusebius, and Miltiades, each guiding the faithful from prison or exile, each ensuring that Peter's line never broke. The persecution varied by region, harsher in the east under Diocletian and Galerius, and milder in the west under Constantius. But overall, it drove Christian worship entirely underground until Diocletian's abdication in 305 AD. The apostles' successors urged the faithful to look to the Bishop of Rome to ensure the unity of the church, as heretics attacked from within with false doctrines, while the world and Rome's emperors attacked from outside. Even as Rome's emperors declared war on Christianity, her bishops preserved the gospel and the faith. More martyrs were made, including Polycarp, Agnes, Perpetua, Felicity, Cecilia, and many others. Their courage will convert the empire, but for now, the empire still haunted the bride of Christ, and beneath its streets, in candlelit catacombs, a greater kingdom gathered, one that not even hell could overcome.
Hostility, the seeker of truth.